So hello everyone. I already got a great introduction. So I am indeed a web developer and a graph database consultant. The web development part explains the PHP part because PHP is a very common language for web developers. And the graph database consultancy came just because I was so passionate about graph databases that I was able to essentially work with them professionally as well. Today I'm going to talk a lot about the PHP and graph ecosystem. Specifically more the ecosystem side, because a lot of things are happening there. So the short plan of it is I'm going to start a little bit with a story, how it actually started, the new PHP ecosystem, because I feel like there are like two phases in this story. And then I'm going to give you an overview of everything that is available right now. And as I said, an ecosystem and stuff like that is usually highly dependent on its people. The people are almost more important than the technology. So I'd like to thank those people as well. And then I will leave you with a few resources so you can continue your graph journey if you are interested in that. Just as an aside, I do quite a few of these live, and I love taking questions and interacting with the public, with the people that are watching. But I would also like to, so you're welcome to ask your questions as well. But I'd also like to put a giant disclaimer on that I might not see your question because I am too busy talking, and I only get visual feedback on the right hand side of my screen. So that's a fair warning, but it shouldn't stop you from asking questions because I'd love to answer them. If I don't answer them, it's just because I am, it's not because I don't like you, it's just because I am too busy and I didn't see it. So yeah, that's about it. As I said, I want to talk about a story. I want to start that way. So let's rewind back, and it's going to be early 2020, late 2019. And I'd like you to imagine you would be like a PHP developer, because this is the kind of story that happened quite a few times at the time. So let's introduce our main protagonist. Let's call him Dan. He is fresh off the boat. You can see that from his smile. He's still way too happy to be a web developer. He is very naive, but he's fresh off the boat and he has a lot of energy. So he starts to build his own application out of fun. And he worked on it pretty hard for a few months. Then he puts it live, and it actually becomes relatively successful. So what happens usually when these things become successful, that's actually when a lot of problems start to happen from a technical perspective. He tested everything, of course, just with his own test data. He didn't really performance test it or stress test it. So once it went live and it became more successful, he gets quite a few complaints, and he opens up his console and he sees this. Just a bunch of long-running queries. Now, it's not that that never happens, but he built his system in such a way that this data was very and highly relational. So he had a bunch of queries that were performance intensive joins. We're in an intermediate talk. You know the story. You know how this goes. You know what the big advantages are of graph databases and how these relationships can solve these problems. But then, because he's fresh off the boat and he just got back from college, he didn't really realize that was an actual option. So he gets a little bit triggered by that, and he starts to do his own research on how to solve this. And of course, like a lot of us that are, it's a story that happens quite a lot. He stumbles upon Neo4j, and I'm using the old slides now, or the old logo. He learns about this amazing technology that is super, super performant when it comes to all of these relationships. He's able to keep his unique selling point, which is giving these highly relational information in real time. So he doesn't really have to do a lot from that perspective. So he's so eager to get started, and he sits down early 2020, late 2019, and he realizes there are just a bunch of issues there. It's like a never-ending stream of issues for you at that time, because first of all, just connecting to the database would have been an issue. The tools that were available were relatively abandoned at the time. Just another issue would have been he used Laravel. He used the framework that was highly dependent on the assumption that it was a SQL database. So he essentially had to throw away all those conveniences. He then had to rewrite a lot from scratch. But he's getting there, so he's quite excited. But then, like I said, the deprecation started to happen. There was this big successful library called the Neo4j PHP client, which was designed by Graphware. They did an amazing job, and this is totally not a step at them. They just moved on to other things. So they abandoned the library. And that is, I feel like, where the first phase, the first ecosystem for PHP slowly started to die off. And you can see that in the download graphs as well if you look at 2020. So he actually starts to get confused, and he actually feels a lot of despair because he just invested a lot of time in this technology, a lot of effort in this technology, and there is nothing around anymore. So he looks around, and he just sees basically a giant desert. So he gets a bit confused by that. It's not a good place to be if you're a PHP developer and you're using like an esoteric technology and no real tools exist anymore that can be used. But then, of course, he sees a big opportunity because version 4.0 has been released. And that means that the deprecated library at that time just didn't work anymore with the newest version, and nobody was updating it. Well, it's not really true, because that's part of the opportunity that he saw. He actually zoomed out a little bit and he realized that he wasn't really in a desert and that it wasn't really completely abandoned, but there was some form of desertification going on. It was moving in the wrong direction. People were leaving the Neo4j and PHP space quite rapidly. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't any life left anymore. There were a lot of people that were still developing systems, still developing libraries, still working on it. And one of those was Michel. Michel, I'll talk a little bit more about him. He's an amazing guy, and he essentially looked from it from a different angle. He realized that he realized that there were different ways of solving these things and different ways to talk about this, because as PHP developers we tend to quickly, sometimes too quickly, abstract things away into oblivion. And I feel like Michel is kind of the complete opposite of that, because he looked at the Bolt protocol, which is a protocol that has been designed by Neo4j, but it is an open standard. And he looked at that and he said, I can just essentially map this one-to-one to PHP code. And it's a binary protocol, it's an application level protocol. So it was a great way for him to get to do this. And I feel like he really enjoyed working on that. He still works on it to this very day. So he essentially built a library from scratch, doing all the binary communication and just mapping it directly to the Bolt protocol. So there was that, and that, of course, essentially already worked with version 4 because he was actively maintaining it. And I feel like a lot of people were trying to fork the Graphware library, the clients, and try to use it as well, but it was difficult to gain any traction. And I feel like this is the point where most people would stop. Maybe even a step before, they would see, oh, all the libraries, they're not maintained anymore, and they would just not use it, and their story with graphs sadly would end there. And that is something that, as someone that's extremely passionate about graphs, it hurts a little bit to hear that these stories happened, because the technology is extremely powerful. So yeah, I feel like that is a missed opportunity. So I'm actually now moving the story away from then, because this is, I feel like, the story most people had in their experience in their life when it was 2020 and they were a PHP developer. But then I came up with my own thing as well, because I thought to stop these desertifications, you can reverse the process. You need a lot of things for that. You need to have fertile soil, you need to plant trees, you need to take care of it. And there is going to be a moment where you reach some critical mass and the ecosystem becomes self-sustainable. So I planted my own tree. And I designed a PHP client and driver. And there's like a big asterisk in there, because first of all, I started making it as a client. But I started to realize that every project that did it that way kind of fell flat, because nobody uses it, because they would just fork it. And I felt also that the existing library implementation, if you were to fork it, would be working against me. So I saw three things. I saw the Bolt library, I saw the legacy client, and then I saw all the official drivers at Neo4j. And so I tried to combine the three of them. So that is why it says client and driver, because it has the client API that most people are used to in PHP, but it also provides a driver that is in line with the official API. It is not an official one, but it is very well supported and very well maintained. And then, of course, it took the amazing technology that Michel built, and it used the Bolt protocol underneath as well. And from there, things slowly started to take off. And it was, in my mind, a little bit the beginning of an ecosystem, because now there were two people working on this, and I would love to have more people work on this. But we were moving in the right direction. And I feel also to build an ecosystem, it's not just about a single company. It's not just about these things. And I feel like Neo4j understands that pretty well, because they're working on their own ecosystem as well. So the time was ripe. They were working on GQL. GQL is an ISO standard, which is, I don't know why people don't talk that much about it, because I think it's an amazing thing. So they managed to standardize something that is very equal to the Cypher language, and they standardize it as an ISO standard. And I think, I don't know the exact time, but I think it's been decades since a language like that has been standardized. So it is great news. So I feel like, if you want to build an ecosystem from a programming language on some technology, it needs to be bigger than just a single company, because if you're going to invest time as an open source library developer, you're going to want to reach an audience that is as wide as possible. And it's just amazing if you, for example, build a query builder or something like that, and it works automatically with a bunch of different databases. And I think that is also part of why so many tech stacks use SQL still, because if you develop like a library or a framework around SQL, you will know that it'll work with MariaDB, with MySQL, with PostgreSQL, all these kinds of things. And another part of the ecosystem that Neo4j was working on was the Bolt driver, the Bolt protocol, because this is also an open standard, and a lot of different graph databases uses it. And there is a great story about that, because Michel, I heard this excitement because he built the Bolt driver, not really being aware, as far as I'm aware, that it is not something specific to Neo4j. So all of a sudden, these issues come in from people from AWS, people from memgraph, and they were essentially using it already. And so they were giving their own issues, they were posting their own issues with it. So that's a great feeling if you are building a library, to have these different people come in where you didn't expect it from. So I feel like it's time to move on to the next phase, because we got some new and fresh PHP libraries, and there are a lot of bigger standards now that are bigger than just a single company. So I feel it is time to talk a little bit about the LAMP stack, because we as PHP developers are extremely familiar with the LAMP stack. We use Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. But we all know that that is not true anymore. We all know that as a PHP developer, it doesn't matter if you're using Linux, it doesn't matter if you're using Mac, if you're using Windows. We can use them all, and it becomes MOMP, LAMP, WAMP, whatever. But then it gets even more specific, because I think most people don't even use Apache anymore, but we use Nginx, we use other things as well. We do cloud deployments. So we changed the A, we changed the L, and also with P, we added a lot of things to that. Like, you can work with PHP, but a lot of PHP developers also use JavaScript and they use TypeScript. So they've been moving around with that as well. It's only the M that has been the same essentially for a few decades now. It's always about SQL. Like, we all know the M is actually an S. It's the M from MySQL, because that's how it happens. But we just think about SQL databases. So that M never really changed. It always was SQL, and that frustrates me beyond belief as a graph enthusiast, because I feel like we're losing out on a lot of things that way. So because I'm a bit of a nerd, I used regex for this, but I'd like to present the goal, the new challenge that I think we need to take on as a PHP community, and that is that we need to change the lamp stack, because the lamp stack has been, it doesn't really is there anymore because we use Linux, Mac, Windows, and all these kinds of things. But I feel like we need to change that M. That M needs to become either MySQL or graphs. That is essentially the point and the thing we need to go to. And I know this is a lot to ask for, but we're not blowing just some steam. Like it is, we're moving in the right direction, and it's growing pretty fast. Just like this is kind of to prove my point. In Laravel, if you go to these technologies, well, if you go to this framework, you will see there are relationships. There's a query builder. There is a query builder. All these kinds of things. All of these tools that are available would map really nicely also to graph databases. Some of them even better, especially the relationship section. So it's such a shame that we're not using that yet, I think. Same with Symfony. Symfony uses Doctrine, uses as a database section. It's all SQL based. Yeah, and I'd just like to say, like the technologies in PHP are extremely mature and they're very well consolidated, because only the bottom two are like kings of web development right now, or PHP development. You've got Laravel with Eloquent and Symfony that uses ORM. And then I started to Google for other query builders. I didn't really find any that were that were used very often, besides Opus, which is the purple circle in the top left. So they're doing their own thing, which is amazing, but it's also SQL. So we are changing that. Like I said, we're not blowing hot steam. The ecosystem is growing and expanding, and I think this is where most people came here to see. And this is just to prove my point. We are growing at an exponential rate. The driver downloads just reached 15,000 downloads a month. That means the Bolt driver does that same number, because we are very well intertwined. We depend on each other, and it's only moving up. So I'm pretty confident that we are moving in the right direction, and we're getting quite a lot of interest. And yeah, that means other libraries are being built on top of that. So I built a dependency graph, and I love the fact that this can be a graph, because yeah, we're all people that love graphs, and we know that so many things can just be represented this way. Same here. So the mother of all the technologies when it comes to PHP is Bolt. Oh. If you take a look at the slides, Bolt is being used by the client and driver, which is my package. And on top of that, you can see Symfony Neo4j uses it. I'm playing around with the WordPress plugin. It uses that. A new Eloquent uses that. There is an entity manager that uses it. The entity manager also uses Cypher DS, which is a pilot project for starting to have like a common interface for all the data structures. And then we have the entity manager that also uses DSL as well as Neo Eloquent. So yeah, there is a lot going on there, and these are the ones that I feel like, if you want to get started and you want to pick and choose and you want to have something that you know will work and will be maintained for quite a long time, these will be the ones you should look at. But of course, there are many others, some of them that I'm not aware of. So I just like to point that out before moving forward. If you want to get an overview of most of the libraries that are very well supported and maintained, you need to go to neo4j-php on GitHub. You will find a compiled list there of the DSL, the entity manager. But because it is like an ecosystem, it's not something that is centrally managed. They all were first from another project or from another group. And then some of them decided or wanted them to move to the Neo4j-PHP organization. But you'll find some of them, like Neo Eloquent, that are still at other places. So it's not a definitive list. That's what I'm trying to say. But you will find most of them there. So just from a technical perspective, I'd like to zoom in a bit more on these libraries that are available. Just so you can get a feel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to list where you can get them on Packagist, where you can find them on GitHub. the current state they're in, if they're production ready, which version they are, who the maintainers are, and I'll describe it a little bit, and then I'm gonna give you like a taster, like just 5 lines of code to give you a feel of how these libraries work and what the point of them is. So Bolt is, I've talked so much about this already. It is from Michel. It is it's essentially a one-to-one implementation of the Bolt protocol on the application level. And it is currently in version 5.0. He is by far the fastest developer in the community. If you have an issue or if an update is released, chances are he will fix it or implement it the same day. So it is also extremely stable. It's currently in version 5.0. And of course, it is there. I'd say the main point of it is it'll let you connect to any graph database that is Bolt enabled, and you just can start sending and receiving messages and data. It's just a low-level implementation. So if speed is high on your if flexibility is very high on your list of priorities, if you don't care about any abstractions, if you want to optimize a lot of things, this is a great library to use. And here is a code example. So I need to keep the time in mind. So I need to be fast. Like I said, it's a network protocol. So you will have to create a socket. You can wrap a Bolt object around that socket. And then that Bolt object will essentially be a factory because it will create a protocol for you. If you have the build method on there, it'll return a protocol. It can have any version. It will be negotiated. And then once you got it, you can just send all the messages that are available to you in Bolt. So hello, run, pull, begin, commit, all of these things are available to you. So here's an example of someone that logs in with Neo4j credentials. It'll then run a query, pull the results, and because it's a pipeline-based algorithm, pipeline-based system, you can then get the responses just synchronously, one after another. I think this is a new feature in version 5.0. Before that, it was you run and get the result immediately. Then we move on to the clients. So I am the one who developed the client. It is and maintains it. It is currently on version 2.8. And I'd say it's just a general purpose driver and client. If you just want to run queries in your application and not have to worry about anything else, this is, I think, the best library. And when I say don't worry about anything else, I am pretty confident about that. It doesn't matter if you are working in a cloud environment, in a cluster, in a local host environment with a single server, if it's a community one. You don't have to care about any of this as long as you provide the first initial connection configuration. It'll figure it out on its own. So yeah, that is a thing. So to give you an example of how it works, you can build a client. A client has drivers. It uses them under the hood. That's how I split it. That is why it is client and driver. The results, you can just run it and you'll get the results returned to you immediately. So here is a match query, and then you can just iterate over the results and get them very easily with all of these helper methods. Yeah, so that is the 5 lines of code for the client. Then there is the DSL one. This is maintained by Marijn. I'd say it is, yeah, DSL. It's actually Cypher DSL, but I didn't like how it looked visually. I just put DSL there. It is just an abstract representation of the Cypher query language. So you can just manipulate the statements as objects instead of strings. It's a very powerful tool, but it is extremely complex as well. I use it in some of the libraries that we built, but I don't know if it is something a lot of people will use unless they have very complex use cases. So here is an example. The final query in the comments below is what it becomes if you build it. But I took some creative liberties to make everything fit in a screen. It's not exactly the same as what would be the exact output, but it should prove the point. So here you see like you can programmatically create nodes, add properties to them, create relationships to them, add them to a query object, make it return something, build it, and everything will magically appear as a string. So it's very powerful. Then there is a Symphony Bundle. This is a really simple one. Right now, it's in states 0.4.2. The reason for that is also very simple. We haven't really pushed anything about this. We should, but I'm not confident enough that enough people have used it to have all the bugs ironed out of it. So I'm still considering it in beta. It's just a simple bundle, and you can configure the clients in a Symfony application that way. So the code I'm going to show you is not going to be PHP. It's going to be YAML. It's just an example. You can then just use these configurations and add them, and then you can access them from your Symfony application without any problems. So it's just very convenient. If you don't want to mess with the dependency injection yourself manually, you can do it like this. And then this, I feel like, is the coolest library. It is now in beta as well. It's version 2.0. Version 1 was maintained and is still maintained by Abed, and version 2 is mainly maintained by me. And the entire point of it is to just be a complete integration of the query builder and Eloquent with a Neo4j from Laravel. So it's supposed to be a drag-in replacement for your SQL app. Like, you can just change the configuration from SQL to Neo4j, and all of your models, all of your queries will automatically be converted to Cypher statements and will automatically have the assumption that you're working with a Neo4j database. So it is extremely powerful that way. That it's so powerful that we don't even, the code is so familiar to you. You can just extend from the same model, change it. The table will then function as a label. You need to define what is fillable and what is not, and you can just start creating it, querying it, all these kinds of things. It's really amazing. And the added bonuses, there are so many packages. You just inherit the entire ecosystem that has been built on top of that, on the assumption of Eloquent and the query builder. So that's why it is such an amazing and powerful library in my mind. And then all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, CERN comes. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. He just came, I think, to the group, and he said, yeah, I built like this entity manager. And you can just store and manage tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of objects at once. It is in the entity manager pattern. It's also extremely powerful. So just to get like a closer look, we're losing the locator pattern here, but it's everybody is familiar, I hope, with the PSR container in this intermediate talk, but we're just not considering the construction of the object. Let's keep it at that. You construct the entity manager or the EM, and then because you can just create nodes, add properties to them. It can be one, it can be a million, it doesn't really matter. You can add them to the entity manager, and once you push flush, it'll do the actual queries, and it'll optimize it for you as well. So it is an extremely useful tool, especially if you're used to this entity manager patterns. If I remember correctly, it is based on the same pattern that can be found in Doctrine. So yeah, please use it if you think that is something that piques your interest. Play with it, play around with it. So those, I feel like, to wrap up, are the most um, important libraries, a vision of the ecosystem, what has been there already. And yeah, I think this is only possible because there are so many amazing people in this world, and so many great people that are willing to spend their time and energy in something like this. And sometimes it becomes a thankless job, but not with us. Like I am very well aware of what everybody is doing, and we appreciate that a lot. So I would just, the same people that I shown the libraries of, I would like to put them in the spotlight a bit as well. So here they are with their faces. We have Michel, we have Marijn, we have Søren, myself, and Abed. So I would just like to thank them very much. Just to zoom in on them, Michel, you can find him on LinkedIn. He is mainly the maintainer of the Bolt protocol, Bolt library. He's a software developer, a technology specialist, and a problem solver, and he is a full-on problem solver. If you come to him with a problem, chances are he will drop everything to solve it now. He is that passionate about it. So it is, he did it self-proclaimed, but I say it is very well. It's true. He is a true problem solver. Then there is Marijn. He maintains the Cypher DSL. He's also a PHP developer. He's working with wiki-based solutions. Also extremely passionate about the DSL. He is a very technical person, very smart. I love working with him as well. He's been great when we are sharing issues and PRs. He's a great guy. Abed is like the oldest of the group. He is the most experienced. He is a CTO. That means he doesn't have a lot of time anymore, which I can appreciate. And he has been the maintainer of Neo Eloquent. It was a very successful library, and yeah, you can find him on LinkedIn as well. And then CERN, he came new. He's new. He's still a student. Also, I feel he is very intelligent. And I don't know where he finds the time. He works super quick at the moment. So congratulations. And then there is a little bit of an invite as well, because like I said, we want this community to grow. So if you want your name on a spotlight like this, if we're doing another community roundup, getting started, I don't know, you can be on the Hall of Fame as well. If you maintain any library that combines PHP and graphs, you are welcome. It doesn't like it is a big, it's a very wide umbrella, but we just love to hear about it, and we'd love to meet you. It doesn't matter what you're doing as an occupation. It doesn't matter if you have LinkedIn or not. I'm just putting this template out there to call on you guys and gals if you are interested. And then a little bit of a Hall of Fame. These are all the people that have actually helped with, that have actually put in some commits in these projects. So yeah, amazing people. Thank you. And then, of course, we are already wrapping up a little bit. I assume people would be having some questions, but not really, apparently. Let's see, unless I don't have access to the chat.
I can see a question on the chat. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, I can.
So there was one question I can see. Do you think we could have Neo4j performance issues or other type of issues if on the same platform we use some API using the Java driver? People are just uploading. I can't see the end of the question. If on the same platform we use some API using the Java driver and some others the PHP driver.
That is very interesting. So the only thing that I could think of would be a possible performance issue is because, let me start off just by saying, no, it shouldn't be an issue in 99% of the use cases, because the server manages its own memory. You're just connecting to it and opening sockets. And that is the only thing that I feel like could be potentially a problem, because both of them implement something called a connection manager. And of course, these connection managers are not able to talk to each other directly. I think if that is actually becoming an issue, I recently released the actual connection pooling, the connection pooling solution, and it is designed in a flexible way, so you can come up with your own solutions. But right now, it is possible to use either sysv semaphores to limit the amount of open connections between different PHP sessions, because they normally can't communicate between each other. Or one that uses the PSR cache, and you can provide any cache to communicate between these processes. That doesn't say anything about how the Java driver uses it. If it is becoming actually a mission critical thing, please post an issue, because these are the kinds of problems I love to work on as well. And we can we can communicate then internally to see if there is a way to make those connection pools communicate with each other. I don't know. It's literally just me putting it out there. But odds of that happening are, I think, pretty slim. And there are other ways you could do it as well. I don't know if you can dynamically limit the amount of connections and balance it that way, but this is going way out there. I think if you would just say, I have 50 connections, a maximum of 50 connections open in my PHP applications and a maximum of 50 connections open in Java, you will not have any issues. Pretty sure. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. We're out of time, so thank you for being with us today.
Okay.
And thank you for showcasing as well and highlighting some member of the community. That was
Yes.
great. And for our audience, please stay tuned. We'll come back in a few minutes.